What would you do if you had a killer dog after you that wasn't just a dog? Or if someone who you held so dear and close in your life turned out to actually want to kill you, and not only that, but replace you? Or if you were stuck in a forest with no way out, and slowly this forest was consuming you? Or if you realized that you're truly trapped in your house, all alone with a monster with no escape? Or, worst of all, if you realized that the Reddit story was actually about you, and at the end of the story, you died. Hello, I'm Cece. Welcome to the Crucible of Character. Thank you so much for all of the support that y'all have given to my other compilation videos. If you like this one, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you might do differently in the stories. And without further ado, the stories. What would you do if you went to go pet a dog and you realized that there was something horribly wrong with it? Something that alluded to the fact that this was no dog, but instead possibly a creature from another world. What would you do if this wasn't only that, but that it slowly began to infect your life, taking over your dreams, taking over all of your waking thoughts, with paranoia, anxiety, and fear of what it might do to you? In today's story, we'll be exploring that and seeing what our main character does, and at the end of the video, I'll give my spiel about what I think I would do. Hello, I'm CC, and welcome to the Crucible of Character. This story was written on the r/NoSleep subreddit by pbubs1997, and it's entitled Good Boy. And it starts like this. I live in a rural part of eastern Kansas. It's your typical Midwestern small town. There's a church on every block, but the nearest hospital is 20 miles out. It's the quiet, bucolic little corner of the world that I call home. It can get boring sometimes, yes, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. There aren't any apartments here, just homes. So when I returned to my hometown after college, I stayed with my folks until I was able to afford the cheapest bungalow I could find. I scored a decent job as a marketing coordinator, and 6 months later, I was handed the keys to my house. My subdivision only has 20 houses in it, so I've gotten to know most of my neighbors fairly well in the 3 years I've lived here. But my closest neighbor, Tom, is the only one I would consider more of a friend than an acquaintance. Like me, Tom lives alone. He's a 63-year-old widower, and his 2 adult sons live across town with families of their own. They visit each other occasionally. He stays with them during the holidays, and sometimes in the summer I'll hear the shrill, joyful laughter of his grandchildren in his backyard. But he's on his own most of the time. He's retired, and I don't think he has any friends apart from me. To be honest, he's all I've got too. I mean, I have a few friends at work, but we don't hang out after hours. Every morning at 8, when I'm out getting the mail, and Tom is leaving for his health walk, as he calls it, we stop and chat for a few minutes. It's usually just run-of-the-mill small talk about the weather or our plans for the day, but I always enjoy conversing with him. His sharp wit, booming laugh, and friendly personality reminds me of my dad. Funnily enough, he told me I remind him of his sons. He always says, "Mason, you've got a good head on your shoulders just like my boys." One morning, while I was out getting the mail as usual, Tom exited his house and began walking down his long gravel driveway to greet me. But unlike every day since I'd known him, he wasn't alone. A fluffy, gray dog with a red collar trotted along beside him on a leash. Noticing that I'd spot his canine companion, Tom smiled at me and waved. I did the same, thrilled to see that he had a new friend to keep him company. "New dog?" I called out. "Yeah, I just got him yesterday," Tom yelled back. "Figured it was about time I had someone to take walks with." I tucked the mail under my arm so I could pet the dog. "He's a handsome fella. What's his name?" "Max," Tom replied, reaching down to scratch the dog behind the ears. That was the name the shelter gave him. He already responds to it, so I didn't see any point in changing it. As the two approached me, I noticed Max wasn't wagging his tail or panting. This wouldn't have been strange in and of itself, but it was his lack of animation coupled with the way his eyes looked that made my excitement shift into unease. While the rest of him was gray, the fur around his eyes was black like a raccoon, making them appear sunken in. The eyes themselves were an icy, bright blue, but they were not the soft, gentle eyes of a dog. They were human-like, glowering at me from within their dark pits with an uncanny intelligence I'd never seen from an animal before. Max sat at Tom's feet as he stood next to me at the mailbox. The dog looked up at me, and I unconsciously took a step back as his piercing gaze met my own. He stared, eyes slowly moving up and down as he appraised me, sizing me up as if I was nothing more than a piece of meat. Suddenly, the idea of petting him didn't sound so nice. "You can pet him if you want," Tom said, as if reading my mind. Then, noticing my discomfort, he added, "He's friendly." I could have begged to differ, but I didn't want to seem rude, and although there was a hunger in his eyes, Max wasn't growling or acting like he would hurt me. Tentatively, I reached down and gave him a pat on the head. At least he felt like a normal dog. "Good boy," I said in the pacifying way that someone might tell a wolf, "Nice doggy," as if that would somehow stop the animal from eating them alive. The whole time I talked to Tom, I could feel Max's eyes on me. Thankfully, Tom kept the conversation short, and after they'd left for their walk, the rest of the day passed uneventfully. However, that night, I dreamt of being chased by a gray dog-shaped thing with the face of a man. It whispered in a raspy voice that sounded like bone cracking. Good boy, good boy, good boy. I woke up sweating, heart racing. I sat up and reached for my lamp, fumbling blindly for the switch. As soon as light flooded the room, I darted my eyes around, trying to spot the hideous creature that had surely followed me into the waking world. Once I was certain that my room was creature-free, I flopped back down on the bed with a sigh of relief. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and told myself it was just a nightmare. I said it over and over like a mantra until my heart rate and breathing slowed and I felt calm enough to go back to sleep. I reached over to click the light off, but stopped when I had happened to glance out the window at Tom's house. There was a light on in his upstairs window, and I could see his silhouette standing there. No wait, it couldn't be Tom. Tom didn't have a snout and pointed ears. It was Max. He was standing on his hind legs, perfectly still, perfectly balanced, just staring. I couldn't see his eyes from this far away, but I knew they were looking directly at me. I could feel it. I shivered and drew the blinds. Then the curtains, for good measure. It didn't matter. I knew he was still there. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe Max had a medical issue. Dogs could stand sometimes, but not like that. Not with posture, not with intent. The next morning, I waited at the mailbox for a few minutes for Tom and Max, but they never showed. A part of me was relieved. As much as I wanted to see Tom, I did not want to see that dog again. But another part of me was worried. Tom was a regimented man. He kept to his strict outline and rarely strayed from it. He wouldn't have missed his health walk unless something was up. Then again, he had a new dog now and might have needed to adjust his schedule around Max's bathroom habits. Maybe he'd left early, or hadn't left at all yet. I managed to convince myself that this was the case and went back inside. That night, when I drifted off to sleep, I was blissfully unaware of the nightmare waiting for me on the other side of consciousness. The dream began with me waking up inexplicably around 1 a.m. I'm a light sleeper, so it could have been any number of things. The odd house noise, the bellow of a train horn, heck, even my own farts if they're loud enough. I closed my eyes to go back to sleep, only to open them again when I heard the sound of a dog barking from outside. It was coming from the direction of Tom's house. As the seconds passed, the barking got louder, closer, and the more clearly I heard it, the more I realized something about it was wrong, unnatural even. I lay there in the dark, listening, trying to discern what was so strange about the noise. The barking continued for a few seconds, paused, and then came the very faint but very human sound of a person clearing their throat. Then the barking resumed. It wasn't a dog at all. It was a person imitating a dog. In my backyard in the middle of the night. What the heck? Confused, I went to the window and opened it. Just as I did, the motion detection light clicked on in my backyard. What it illuminated chilled me to my very soul. Tom was on all fours, barking and looking up at me with wide, terrified eyes. His hands and knees were bloodied and bruised, and he was completely naked save for a red dog collar, Max's collar, around his neck. The collar was attached to a leash. The end of it was wrapped around the paw of Max. He stood upright, shoulders slack, head tilted up at the window, and panting. No, smiling at me. His lips were pulled back to reveal sharp teeth, and his piercing blue eyes burned with malice. My mind screamed at me to help my friend, but when I tried to move, I found myself paralyzed. I could only watch helplessly as Max turned his gaze to Tom. He looked down at his quivering pet, and his grin widened in sick satisfaction. Tom had stopped barking, and now only whimpered, never taking his eyes off me, silently pleading for help. Then, in a raspy, guttural voice, Max spoke. "Tom, sit." Obediently, Tom folded his injured legs and sat on them, wincing slightly. Max licked his lips and snarled, "Speak." Tom opened his mouth and began to scream. I woke up in the same terrified panic I had the night before, only this time, in my frantic search of the room, my eyes found Max's silhouette standing in the doorway. I froze. Terror slammed into me so hard I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think anything except crap, crap, crap. I was trapped in that catatonic state until a wave of adrenaline swept through me and jolted my body into action. I reached for my lamp and flicked the switch with a shaking hand. The instant the room was illuminated, Max's silhouette disappeared. I stared at the empty doorway, breathing heavily. Where is he? Is he gone? Was he even here to begin with? It took me a moment to realize that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But once I did, relief rushed through me. A short, sharp exhalation of breath escaped my lips, as much of a laugh as it was a sob. I put my face in my hands and scrubbed at it convinced I was going crazy. I lay back down, suddenly feeling exhausted. Somehow, after a while, I was able to fall asleep again. There was still no sign of Tom and Max the next morning. I decided I'd go knock on his door later that evening and ask if he'd changed his morning walk time. As the last of the sun's rays faded from the sky, I walked up to Tom's driveway and gave his front door a few raps. I waited, but there was no answer. I rang the doorbell. Nothing, not even Max barking. Tom's car was still in the driveway. He never went anywhere at night due to his cataracts making it difficult to see. I snuck a peek through the glass panels that ran along the sides of the door, but couldn't see any movement or anything at all besides the darkness. It didn't look like a single light was on. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. What if he fell or hurt himself somehow and can't reach the phone? I thought worriedly. I tried the doorknob and found it was unlocked. I didn't know if that was usual for Tom or not, but it deepened my concern nonetheless. Slowly, I opened the door just wide enough to poke my head in. "Tom?" I called out into the darkness. The silence I was met with sent alarm bells ringing in my head. The nightmares that had plagued my sleep for the last few days surfaced in my mind, and with them came a disturbing thought. What if Max did something to him? I shook my head. That's ridiculous. He's just a dog. I tried to convince myself that this was true, but I couldn't stop the doubt from creeping in. I wondered if I should call the cops, have them do a welfare check instead of just waltzing myself into God knows what. But any rational thought I had was being overridden by an urgent need to help my friend. Cautiously, I stepped into the house. "Tom?" I called again, louder this time. I stood there, listening, but the house was eerily quiet and still. A pit of dread formed in my gut. Where's Max? The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I was suddenly overcome by the feeling of being watched. Desperate for light, I felt along the wall for a switch, and thankfully, my fingers brushed across one on the first sweep. I flicked it on. Shock and horror rocketed through me as I was met with a scene straight from my nightmares. In the middle of the living room sat a large metal dog crate. Inside it was Tom, wearing only Max's collar, and a wave of panic engulfed me as I saw he was sitting in a pool of his own blood, his body riddled with injuries. He was unconscious, or maybe... "Oh, no, Tom, I cried, rushing to the side of the crate. On shaking legs, I dropped to my knees beside him, and my heart sank as I looked him over. There was a chunk of flesh missing from his left arm, and the top half of his left thumb was completely devoid of skin and muscle, leaving only the bone poking out like a half-eaten pork rib. His right leg was in a similarly ruined state. There was a large wound above his ankle, so deep that I could see the exposed white of his shin bone. The bone was marred with indentations that looked like teeth marks, as if something had been gnawing on it. Heart in my throat. I watched Tom's chest, hoping and praying for any sign of life. I didn't know if he could still be alive with the amount of blood loss he'd suffered, but by some miracle he was. His chest rose and fell so slightly it was almost imperceptible. Relief flooded through me, and I let out the breath I'd been holding, but I sucked it back in as a startled gasp when I heard a low, guttural chuckle from the hallway behind me. My heart stopped. The breath left my lungs as fear gripped my insides with an icy hand. Oh, crap. Despite every fiber of my being screaming at me not to, I turned around, my heart thudding against my ribcage. There, perfectly balanced on his hind legs, stood Max. The light from the living room barely reached the hallway, so he was shrouded in shadows, but I could see his sharp white teeth showing in a wide demonic grin. Drool dripped from his mouth and onto the floor with a soft play. His eyes, which were locked on me, rolled back until only the whites were visible. Trembling, I began to slowly back away. Max's eyes followed my movements, and, in the same raspy voice from my nightmares, he said, "Stay." As if the word had put a spell on me, I felt my body freeze up. My mind reeled, my lungs gasped for air, and my heart raced, but my muscles were paralyzed. I couldn't even move my eyelids to blink. Try as I might, it was frighteningly clear that this evil presence masquerading as a dog had me at his mercy. Max's blood-stained lips curled up even further as he revealed his power over me. "Good boy," he rasped. "Now let me chew on your bones." Then he lunged at me, shrieking like metal being torn in half. His claws clicking on the hardwood. Click, 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 click. He ran with unnatural speed and fluidity on two legs, and in the blink of an eye he was on me, leaping onto my chest and knocking me on the ground. Max sunk his teeth into my lower thigh muscle, and I screamed as white-hot agony exploded in my leg. My limbs flailed about frantically, punching and kicking, but Max seemed unfazed by the blows. Blood spurted from the wound as he tore at my flesh with impossible strength. Then there was the sickening sound and sensation of teeth scraping against bone. Max had found what he was looking for. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. My brain had turned to mush, clouded with hazy fog and fear and pain. But somehow a single thought was able to break through. If you die, Tom dies too. You have to get out and get help. With this realization came a sudden overpowering urge to survive. I summoned all the strength I could muster, and with a roar of anger I kicked Max in the snout with my good leg. His grip lessened just enough for me to rip my bleeding leg out of his mouth and scramble to my feet. I ran through the open front door, stumbling into the yard. The pain was blinding, but I didn't stop. I heard Max behind me, claws scraping, that awful voice chanting, "Stay, stay, stay." The house was only a few yards away, but it felt like miles. Gritting my teeth, I bolted up the driveway to the front door and slammed it shut just as Max reached me. I locked it just in case and collapsed to the floor, heaving, clutching my leg in agony. My vision swam, but I refused to lose consciousness before I could call for help. Thankfully, my phone hadn't dislodged itself from my pocket in the scuffle, and I tried to hold it steady in my shaking hands as I dialed 911. As I spoke to the dispatcher, I could hear the sound of claws scratching and teeth tearing into wood as Max tried feverishly to get it. I knew it wouldn't take him long. What would he do to me? Eat me alive? Keep me prisoner and make me his personal chew toy like Tom? Grunting in pain, I dragged myself into the bathroom, leaving a trail of blood behind me. I shut the door and locked it, putting another barrier between me and that monstrosity. However, this final exertion proved to be too much, and darkness began to overtake me. Through the growing haze, I became dimly aware of the sound of sirens growing closer. I prayed that my salvation arrived in time. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later. Thanks to a cocktail of drugs, my excruciating pain had been reduced to a tolerable level. I asked how Tom was, and to my immense relief, they said he was in stable condition. Since I'd told the dispatcher we'd been attacked by a dog, and our injuries confirmed it, Control searched the area around our houses for Max, but apart from the claw marks on my door, no trace of him was found. Before I was released from the hospital a few days later, I visited Tom. He looked well despite being covered in bandages, and he shot me a beaming smile as I walked in. "Hey, neighbor, come on in." He noticed my crutches and added, "Sit down and rest that leg." I hobbled over to a chair in the corner of the room and sat down carefully. "Hey, Tom," I said, returning my friend's smile. "How are you feeling?" "Great." He held up his thumbs. His left was bandaged and significantly shorter than the other one. 1.5 thumbs up. How about you? "I'm okay. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what happened. I just don't understand." Tom's smile melted into a frown as his face became grim, his eyes somber. He shook his head. "Crap, son, I don't either." He suddenly looked very tired, exhausted from the physical and mental trauma he'd suffered. "All I know is that I'm getting a goldfish next time." I couldn't help but laugh. Despite myself, Tom did too, a booming guffaw, and I knew that he'd be okay. Tom said he'd be staying with his son and daughter-in-law for a few weeks while he recovered. I was relieved, not just because Tom would be looked after by his loved ones, but because he wouldn't be alone at his house where Max could find him. I know he's still out there prowling around in search of the ones who got away. It's for that reason that I've decided to stay at my parents' house for a bit, at least until Tom gets back. I've been missing them lately, anyways, and of course they're happy to have their son home. It's been 2 weeks, and I'm still having nightmares about Max, ones where I wake up screaming. Every time. That's not what worries me, though. My parents' house backs up to a cornfield, and for the last few days, when I've looked out the window at night, I swear I can see Max's silhouette standing among the stalks, always upright, always facing towards the house. I'm keeping the curtains closed from now on, and I asked my dad if I could keep his rifle in my room, just to feel a little safer, and he obliged. I don't know if Max can get inside the house or not, but if he can, I'll be ready. If he can, then it's only a matter of time before I wake up to the sound of his claws clicking on the floor as he makes his way to me. Click, 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 click. The end. Wow, that was a really good story. I myself used to live out in the Midwest, and so I kind of was able to create a really visual picture of what this might look like. Lots of rolling hills, lots of fields, and even cornfields, especially towards Kansas. It's kind of really ominous, a lot of those suburbs way out there. A lot of those newer developments, they have, like one tight suburb, but then all of it just kind of backs up to fields for miles and miles and miles. It's almost like a little pocket in the middle of nowhere as they try to grow those pockets to reach each other. So I can kind of imagine that, especially as he said, it was kind of in a new development. Beyond that, it kind of reminds me almost of the visuals from that movie Signs, if you ever seen it, of the alien standing on top of the barn, just looking at him through the window. as he woke up from the nightmare. Wow, that's pretty freaky to think that one of those dogs, one of those creatures that you're supposed to love, that you're supposed to have as your best friend, something that you're supposed to trust in, could be so diabolical. I think it was definitely a good idea to go over and check on Tom. I definitely probably would not have waited until nighttime to do it, but at least, Tom was okay, right? That's what matters. I think that another different thing that I would have done is, instead of just going in there, after noticing that the door was unlocked, I would have for sure just called the cops. And especially if I looked my head in there just to peek and saw the cage, I probably wouldn't have run over to it. I would have closed the door, run back over to my house, and called the cops. It's easy in those situations to kind of want to be a hero, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. But a hero's only good until they're dead, And unless they symbolize something greater themselves, of course. But in this case, no. So I think the smartest option would have been to just get out, call the cops, then come back, of course. Easy peasy. Whatever this demon thing is, it's going to take a lot of take it down. But luckily they're in the Midwest, and there's more guns and people out there. So, yeah, I'm sure he's in safe hands, especially with that rifle. Hopefully. But anyways, folks, what do you think you would have done in this scenario? What do you think you would have done differently? Is there anything that you would do to stay alive? Is there anything you would do to go get the dog? Would you go and get the dog, or would you stay in defense mode? I think from today's story, we can learn that things aren't always as they seem. And there are a lot of things out there that will work actively to subvert our expectations, kind of like this, where the creature chose to be a dog, I would assume chose. Because it doesn't really have any of the characteristics of a dog unless it's pretending to be that dog to inflict damage. So anyways, be careful, everybody. And if you would like to hear more of these scary stories, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification, because I will be uploading them daily and you don't want to miss them. Anyways, I've been CC, and thank you for watching. Bye. What would you do if out of nowhere you began receiving calls from someone you loved who had recently passed away? What if you were trying so hard to get closure, and instead you were consistently revisited by this person over and over, never letting you forget or move on? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Well, I'm CC, and welcome to the Crucible of Character. Today we have another Reddit story. This one was posted to the r/NoSleep subreddit by OwnPositive1212, and it's entitled, 3 months after my wife's funeral, she started calling every night at 2:13 a.m., and it starts like this. The calls started 3 months after the funeral, same time every night, same voice. Lock the door twice, she whispers, and don't answer if it isn't me. Click. I do what she says. I always did, even when she was alive and already leaving me. She loves someone else at the end, a woman, the kind who holds your hand and robs you blind with her other one. They thought I didn't know. They thought I didn't see the second toothbrush, the softened lies, the long showers after Pilates. They thought I didn't read the messages. They thought I wouldn't taste the wine. I did. I swallowed. I smiled. I asked for another glass. I've always been good at playing dead. They did it the gentle way. Candles, music, poison, with a fruit note. She sat close and told me I'd go in my sleep, and her girl stood behind her with the kind of smile you use to put a dog to rest. I closed my eyes at the right time, let my pulse go soft, let my breath go thin, let the guilt do half their work for them. They drove me in the dark. They cried the right tears. They laid me by water and held hands and told each other they were brave. And when they left, I got up. I walked home with wet shoes and a throat full of metal, the moon hanging like an open eye. I unlocked my own door twice and sat in my own chair until morning. When she came in and saw me, she pressed a hand to her chest, like a cliché. She made a small sound. She folded to the floor. The doctors called it a heart attack. Her girl didn't scream. She kissed me on the mouth and tasted like rosemary and crime. Told you you'd come back, she said. Because here's the part my wife never learned. Her girl was mine first. We planned it quietly. Months before the poison, she slid into my messages, and I let her. She rehearsed the lines with me, and then told them to my wife. She chose the wine, the dosage, the song. I chose the night. It was a simple plan. Let them kill me, come back wrong. Let guilt finish what the bottle started. She'd always had a bad heart. The surgeons said so when she was 22. She kept her pills in a white ceramic bowl that said blessed on it. She was careful with everything except me. Lock the door twice. The dead woman begs me now every night. I do it out of habit, out of love, out of something meaner than both. People ask what grief feels like. It feels like power when you stop pretending you need forgiveness. I kept the house. I kept the car. I kept the rosemary my wife's lover planted on my windowsill the week after the funeral, because I like the way it smells when I cut it. Sometimes at 2:13 a.m., the phone rattles on the nightstand and I answer. You were supposed to love me, she says. Why are you still with her? I tell her the truth. Because you taught me exactness. Because you taught me to check the locks. Because you made me practice being alone. And then you left me with someone who hates me. Click. In the morning I make eggs in her old pan. The girl walks out of my bedroom, our bedroom, wraps herself in my wife's robe, and laughs when I set 2 plates down like some suburban priest. Think she still calls? She says. Every night. I say. The girl kisses my cheek and steals my fork because stealing is how she says I love you. We don't talk about the water. We don't talk about the wine. We don't talk about how easy it is to teach someone how to kill you if you promise them it's mercy. We do talk about locks. 2 turns, always 2. Before you judge me, understand this. I didn't make my wife plan my death. I just stopped getting in the way when she wanted to be free. I let her believe the poison would do it clean. I let her believe guilt wouldn't. And when she fell, I didn't catch her. I answer the phone instead. Don't answer me if it isn't me. She pleads. Please. I always answer you, I tell the dead. I just don't do what you say. Last week, the girl asked if I ever feel haunted. I said, only when I forget the rules. What rules? Lock the door twice. Don't drink from anyone you don't plan to bury. Don't give away what you can take. And if a phone rings after midnight, don't answer if it isn't me. She finished, grinning. She knows how to speak my language. She's fluent in we. If you want a happy ending, there isn't one. There's just a kitchen at night, and a phone that rings at 2:13, and a man who picks it up because he likes to hear a ghost learn the shape of his silence. There are 2 plates in the sink, and 2 locks on the door, and 2 people who sleep fine because we earned it the ugly way. Sometimes the dead asks for apologies. Sometimes she asks me to leave the girl. Sometimes she asks what I did with the bottle, the car, the second toothbrush, the blessed bowl. Where is she? She sobs once. Where did you put her? She's right here, I say, and I watch my lover walk past my chair in my wife's robe to lock the door twice. The line goes quiet. Then the slow breath of someone who can't help loving me wrong. Watch out, she whispers finally. I smile into the dark. We wrote the rules. The end. That was a pretty short story. I did like it, though. It kind of really reminds me of sort of like a modern retelling of A Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. It really reminds me of that because it's almost as though in the desire to get his wife to die from grief, he almost manifests this ghost out of grief himself, if you were to believe that it's grief and not a ghost. Because on the other hand, because of the awfulness of murdering your own wife, that could just be a ghost just haunting him. Do you all believe in ghosts? What would you do in this situation? I think personally I just would not be playing around on my wife. That's a simple and easy explanation, and yeah, I mean, that's simple, right? Don't mess around and don't have to find out, right? Don't create problems if you don't want to deal with the consequences. I think it's interesting when we kind of try to replace someone in our lives and put someone in that place and kind of make them fit to the hole that was already there, as opposed to letting them be who they are. And so I think in a way, he replaced his wife, and he didn't really want something else. He just wanted his wife. That's why it's interesting that if you were to read this from the protagonist's point of view, he talks about how he describes the woman. I guess if it is a woman who is the protagonist, it might be a female. But the protagonist describes the woman, the new lover, as wearing the wife's robe and doing a lot of the same things the original wife had done. And so I think in a way, that is another indication of the grief that the protagonist feels, that they were swept up in it and they kind of manifested this person to be more like the person that they lost. So in my analysis, I would say it's probably a person who's really struck by grief, and that's reasonable because you should definitely not kill your spouse. But anyways, what would you do in this situation? What would you do if there was a ghost of somebody who you loved, and maybe you weren't involved in their killing or their death at all, but imagine somebody you loved, and if they were gone, and if they randomly started calling you really early in the morning, what would you do? What would you answer? What would you tell them? What would you ask them? Alrighty, well, I'd love to hear all these things and more in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video and you want to stick around for tomorrow's video, which will be another scary story and an analysis, please make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss it, as my videos tend to get swept up in the algorithm. If you don't hit subscribe now, you may not ever stumble across my channel again. We're trying to hit 100 subs by the end of the year, and I'd love to have your help in that. Anyways, guys, I've been CC, and this is the Crucible character. Goodbye for now. What would you do if you went to a forest, a place where you're supposed to be able to feel peace, somewhere where you went to relax, and slowly the forest consumed you, leaving nothing but another tree amongst its army? Well, in today's story, we'll be discussing just that. We'll be trying to understand how our protagonist might be able to escape this fate, and hopefully learn something to become better people ourselves. Hello, I'm CC with the Crucible character, and today's story was posted on the r/Weird Stories sub by Norman Crane, and it's entitled We Who Become Trees. Now this story is almost like a poem, just so you know. And it starts like this. And the lands that are left are leaves scattered by the wind, which flows like blood, veins across the present, the swamp land separating prisoner from forest, where all shall become trees. So it is said, said the elder. He expired at night in his cell, months before the escape, about which he had for so long dreamed, and had, by clear communication of this dream, hardened and prepared us for. For the swamp land shall take all of you. It is understood, yes? Self-sacrifice at the altar of the bog. Yes, we nod. The night is dark, the guards vigilant, our meeting secret and whispered. Your crimes shall not follow you in the forest. Ye shall root anew, unencumbered. The swamp sucks at us, our feet, our legs, our arms, upon each falling. But we must keep the pact. Belief in brotherhood above all. Where one submerges, the other pulls him out. When one doubts, the others reassure him. There is an end, a terminus. The elder's heart gave out. Aged, it was, and gnarled, falling into final sleep, he imagined for the first time the totality of the forest dream, a beyond to the swampland, a place for the rest of us to reach. By dying, dream, by night, dreaming, create, and by death dreaming, permeate. Death, and by morning, meet, and the candle, too, gone out. We are dirty, cold. We push on through fetid marsh and jagged jutting bones of creatures which before us and failed to cross. Beasts both great and small. The condors have picked clean their skeletons long ago. The swamp bubbles, the bubbles pop. I am the first to sacrifice. Taking a step, I plunge my boot into the swamp water. Pain, endless and increasing. This is not to be feared, this is the way. Let suffering be your compass, and respite your coffin. Lift up, out a leg, without a foot, screaming, blood running down, a protruding cylinder of brittle white bone. The others aid me, and I steady myself, and I force the bone into the swamp. I force myself onward, step by heavy step, and the swamp takes, and it takes. The prison is a fortress. The fortress is surrounded by swampland. We, who are brought to it, are brought never to exit. How many days of swamp in each direction, we ask? There is a map. A point in the middle of a blank page. The elder tears it up. Forever. Forever, forever, forever in every direction. It is understood, yes? Then escape is impossible. No, the elder says. Forever can be traversed, but the will must be strong. The mind must believe. The map is a manipulation. The prison makes the map, and as the prison makes the map, so too the map makes the prison. The open mind cannot be held. So how? First, then by remaking. We are less. 4 whole bodies reduced to less than 3. Yet, all of us remain alive. All have lost parts of limbs. We suffer. O elder, we suffer. Above the condor circle, the landscape is unchanging. Shreds of useless skin hang from our hunched-over, waiting bodies like rags. Wounded, we leave behind us a wake of blood, which mixes with the swamp and becomes the swamp. Bogfish slice the distance with their fins. How will we know arrival? You shall know. But how, elder? What if we traverse forever, yet mistake the swampland for the forest? If you know it to be forest, forest it shall be. I am a torso on a single half-eaten knee. I carry across my shoulder another who is a head upon a chest, a bust of human flesh and bone and self, and still the swampland strips us of more and more. How much more must we give? It is insatiable, greedy, it is hideous, it is alive, it is an organism as we are organisms. Sometimes I look back and see the prison, but I do not let that break me. Leave me, go on without me. Look at me, I am nothing left, says the one I carry. Never, I say, never, say the other, says the elder. All must make it, or none do. Such is the revelation. Heads and spines we are, that is all. We swim through the swampland, raw and tired. My eyes have fallen out. I ache in parts of my body I no longer possess. My spine propels me. Skin peels off my face. Insects lay eggs in my empty sockets, my empty skull. End time. The call echoes around the prison. Killer man present. Killer man present. Names are called out. Those about to be executed are brought forward. Like skeletal tadpoles, we wriggle up, out of the swamp, onto dry land, onto dry grass, and birds chirping, and sunshine. One after the other, we squirm. Is this the place? Yes. Yes. I can neither see, nor smell, nor hear, nor taste, nor feel. But what I can know, I know. And I know that I am in the forest. I am ready to grow. I am ready to stand eternal. The world feels small. The swampland is an insignificance. The prison is a mote of dust floating temporarily at dawn. This I know. And I know trunk and branches and leaves. They call my name. I hold the hand of another, and he holds mine, until we both let slip. The killer man, hooded, waits. The stage is set. The blade's edge is cold. I am with you, brother. To the forest. to the forest. Resplendent I am, and towering, a tree of bone with bark of nails and leaves of flesh, blood sap coursing within, and fruits without. The killer man's eyes meet mine as he lifts the blade above his head. Soon I will be laid to rest. Once, rage not like the others. Do not beg. When comes the time, meet it patiently face to face, for you are its reflection, and what it's reflected, what is, said the elder. And now, as the killer man's hands bring down the blade, I am not afraid, for I am rooted elsewhere. The blade penetrates my neck. One of my fruits dropped to the ground, one of many, filled with seeds of self. It is already insects know the promise of its decay. And my head rolls forward as the killer man pushes away my lifeless body with his boot. A warm wind briefly caresses my tranquil branches. The prison is in ruin. The elder lights a candle before sleep. Tonight we go, I say. Tonight we escape. The end. Wow, that was really interesting. There was a lot of, I think, symbolism. I think there's so much deep story that you can pull out of this, so many things that you can apply to yourself. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that it's so important to understand what we're signing up for when we sign up for things. Kind of make sure that the journey is rewarding, but also that the reward is truly what you want. There's a saying that I really like, and it's basically just you'll get what you want. In the end, you will get what you want. If you truly want something, you'll get it. You will end up with it. Because if you truly want that thing, you're going to do the things required to get that thing, or to be that person, or whatever it may be. So I think, although the story itself is very vague, and it opens up so many questions, what is the prison? What is the swamp? Why does it eat people? I think there's so many metaphors that can be drawn in between the lines. I think it's so important that along the journey, we have to ask ourselves, is it truly worth it for the destination? Is it truly worth it to sacrifice all that we are for what we thought we wanted? Do we still want the thing that we thought we wanted? Are you on a journey right now that leads to a goal that you want? Or have you lost yourself in the journey? Have you become like this person, slowly, part by part, been removed from the story altogether? Are you who you want to be? Do you have what you want, or are you on your path towards it? These are the questions. Well, everyone, I appreciate you stopping by. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please let me know down below. What would you do differently in this story? What questions do you have? I know there's not much different to be done, but what questions do you have about this story? What would you be dying to know about it? What would you ask the author if you had the chance? Anyways, I'm CC with The Crucible of Character, and if you enjoy this content and would like to see more, please make sure to subscribe for more daily uploads. I love you all. Goodbye. What would you do if, in an attempt to add some more technology to your home, to maybe make everyday life easier for you, to be able to free up time for things that matter to you, like your family or your friends or any hobbies that you might have going on, you inadvertently let something into your home that shouldn't be there, something malicious, something trying to attack you? What if this technology actually, instead of helping you, ended up working to kill you? Well, that will be the topic of today's story. So hopefully you stick around to the end to learn what our protagonist for today does to get out. This story was posted to the r/NoSleep subreddit by AvailableClass2481, and it is entitled, Buying a Robot Vacuum Changed My Life in a Terrifying Way. Hello everybody, I'm CC with The Crucible Character, and before we start today's story, I'd like to remind you that if you enjoy these content and these videos that I make, please like, comment, and subscribe. It means the world to me, and if you are sure to subscribe, then you won't miss out when I post tomorrow's video as well. Anyways, into the story. Let me be clear, I'm not bougie. I'm barely scraping through grad school with enough for groceries, but I occasionally splurge every few months. Last time, me and my boyfriend got an air fryer. This time, we got one of those automatic vacuums. I'd always wanted a pet, but it took some convincing for me to like the idea of a robot mapping my house. I figured with no neighborhood cats around to adopt, I might as well embrace the next best thing. We lovingly named it Toto. And while it took me a few weeks to warm up to him, I'd say that I liked him more than my boyfriend ever did. We even put some glow-in-the-dark, googly eyes on him to accentuate his personality. I've always been bad about cleaning, so it was a big help. But I couldn't get over the sound it made. Don't get me wrong, they were completely normal. It was just bumps and knocks from the other room. But something about it made me jump. I can't help but imagine someone else knocking around in my apartment when I hear bumps in the night or day. I started to feel like the vacuum was a bad idea. Like Toto, might bump the ankles of whatever is hiding behind a curtain and provoke it to finally attack me. I've always been afraid of that sort of thing, though. I used to talk to shadows when I was a kid. I think I was trying to reclaim some of that fear I felt when staring into a blank corner, eyes swimming for details that aren't there. By impressing myself on that darkness, I was removing any space for the boogeyman to hide. And if he were standing in the corner, just out of my vision, then maybe I would annoy him into getting it over with. I admired how Toto could plunge directly into the darkness without fear or worry, eyes fading into the blackness. It was sort of like having a dog in the apartment. I tried to convince myself that I didn't need to worry about any hidden intruders. Toto's ears would perk up, and he would beep, dutifully alerting me to danger. Between my boyfriend, myself, and Astro Dog, things were perfect and well kept. We hardly ever had to make any to-do lists and maintained a healthy chore-life balance. Soon, though, I noticed that cabinets were being left open, and items of mine were being left in strange spots. Sometimes, Toto would get stuck on a pair of my underwear or a sock. I know dudes sometimes like to grab a piece of their girlfriend's clothes for inspiration, but this was getting weird, and quick. I eventually confronted him after I found one of my favorite bottoms, dampened by what seemed to be saliva. It smelled awful. He insisted it wasn't him, that I was being crazy, that maybe Toto has a crush. I guess things weren't as perfect as I had thought, because that schism grew until we could no longer stand each other. At least, I got full custody of Toto. It took a while to get used to sleeping alone again, so I started staying up later. No boyfriend smell to lull me back to sleep anymore. I never slept without a lamp, but would still find myself talking to that veil of shadow that hung over the furthest corner of my room. I know you're there. This time it seemed my accusations were answered. I heard rustling from beyond my vision, back in my closet. I honestly half expected someone or something to emerge slowly from the darkness, but it was just Toto's bright green eclipses gliding across the floor. I need to get out of this house more. I did just that. I went out drinking with some of my cohorts and ended up getting a little trashier than I meant to. As soon as I got home, I collapsed on the sofa. As I said earlier, I'm not the cleanest person ever, but I'm not the kind of person to forget and misplace. That's why I got so nervous when I came home to find that my perfumes had been completely rearranged. Toto was whirring around in the other room, but I knew there was no way him bumping the shelf could do anything like this. Some bottles faced different ways and were in a completely different order than I had left them. This wasn't like Toto choking on a sock. Someone had entered my bathroom and purposely moved my property, and I had enough proof to dispel any positive thinking. I immediately contacted my property manager's emergency line to make sure my ex returned his key, and that no maintenance workers had been in my room that day. The anticipation of the 30-second hold was enough to make me shed tears. I paced the bathroom. I was convinced that someone had a key and was parading around in my apartment when I wasn't home. Despite how late it was, they answered. Somehow, the knowledge that no one entered my apartment that day put me even further over the edge, rather than at ease. I was alone, confused, a little drunk, and sure that I was being harassed. That was when Toto started beeping. I've only ever heard him make that sound a few times before. Once when he turned onto his side over the edge of one of my platform shoes I left out. Another when my ex had picked him up like a baby. I turned to my bedroom, which I could clearly peer into from where I stood. 2 green eclipses hanging at eye level. I froze. I don't know for how long. I honestly believe that Toto had sprouted legs for a moment. That was when my eyes started to adjust. Slowly, I began to make out the shape that was suspending Toto in the darkness, inspecting the bottom of his carriage, its long, curious fingers, pried at the seams, the same fashion in which King Kong would pull at the jaws of Godzilla. It seemed frustrated. Something about Toto perplexed the thing, but I couldn't tell its facial features or what emotions it was feeling. All I could make out was limbs and hair. Suddenly, it dropped Toto with a careless thud. Sharp bits of plastic scattered into the darkness as Toto struggled on its back. He squirmed and reached for the pieces of himself in the same desperate manner as a dog who was trying to consume its own throw-up, beeping the whole time. The thing remained where it stood, but now it was looking towards the bathroom. I could see it through the mirror as I sunk behind the door, peering at its reflection through the crack in the hinges. It was a good foot taller than me, but when it shifted its weight, not a pop or crack came from the floorboards. It was impossibly thin, and I swear I could see its chest shifting under its hairy skin, even in the dark. The sounds of Toto's struggle made it hard to focus on anything, but I could clearly hear the figure speak over the noise. It was a mimic of my own voice. "I know you're there." It didn't move, and neither did I. We both just stared at each other through the mirror. I don't think it could really see me, and if it could, it was just my panicked eyeball. Maybe a strand of hair hanging through the edge of the doorframe. I probably couldn't even make out what I was, but it knew I was there. Maybe it hoped I couldn't see it. I wondered if this is what it felt like for the boogeyman, when I would call into the darkness, hoping to rattle whatever might be watching me. But this time, I was the one who was sinking into the shadows, doubling down on my hiding spot, never breaking for a second. I realized that the real boogeyman isn't the one who attacks children in the dead of night. Rather, he's a voyeur, a watcher. I waited and watched for I don't know how long, and so did it. The hours ticked by slowly, and Toto still lay upside down in the same spot. But by now, his battery had died. The beeping had stopped. I could hear the figure breathing, chirping. It almost sounded cute, like a cat or ferret. The sun started to trickle through the window from the spare room, but since I have blackout curtains in my bedroom, the light only made it harder for me to see the figure. I could tell it was moving, slowly shifting back into the cover of darkness, under my bed. The closet? Was it folding into itself, into an unused drawer, or under my mattress? Where did it go when I was here? The fear of wondering was enough to propel me towards the bedroom light switch, but as soon as I emerged from behind the door, it ran out of the darkness, screaming. I say ran, but I'm not sure if it even touched the floor. All 6 limbs worked in perfect coordination to propel itself as quickly as possible towards the front door of my apartment. It grasped at corners and high edges of the ceiling with all of its hands, and its tiny body floated almost gracefully past me. That grace was immediately shattered when it disappeared past the corner of my living room. I heard it banging hard into the front door. It was like when a deer gets stuck behind a fence, so they just keep slamming, hoping to free themselves through sheer perseverance. I rounded the corner to see it in a ball, using all 6 limbs to slam its mass into the door, just a hairy crumple of willfully weird flesh. It shrieked at the sight of me to realize I was following. I was its boogeyman. As I got closer, it cowered further into the corner, releasing some awful-smelling liquid into my shoe rack. I realized it had no legs, only long arms. It looked like a giant dust bunny, with tufts of long black hair coming off its limbs. I couldn't tell where its head was anymore, but it just kept backing up until it was completely squished in the corner, a quarter of its original size. I braced myself and opened the door. While it took some time to find its way out, like a fly through a car window, I could tell it was relieved. It flung itself off my balcony with renewed grace and disappeared into the tall grass of the field next to my apartment. I considered moving out after everything was over. I've got a new roommate now, all things considered. She's a lot more stable than my ex was, and quite cute too. I haven't seen the figure since. I released it from my apartment. I don't even know how it got in. Maybe, just like an insect, you open the door for a split second, and by its own it just shoots right in there and stays until you let it out. The only thing that keeps me from attributing the whole thing to a psychotic break are the chirps and purrs I hear in the morning when I walk to my car. There's no cats in my neighborhood, so I like to think it's Toto number 2 saying good morning. I leave leftovers next to the field sometimes, but only chicken ever gets taken off the plate. The end. That was really interesting. There's definitely a lot going on there. I was totally expecting it to be the kind of robo-cleaner. I had a really hard time kind of picturing the robo-cleaner. Was it kind of like a dog, or was it just that they were kind of personifying it as a dog? I will have to reread it and try and understand that better. But it's an interesting creature, that's for sure. I think a few takeaways I have immediately, or how we could have done better in this situation, or at least how I would have done better, is 1, having strategic weapons throughout your house is straight up not a bad idea. I mean, that's a simple one, right? I have knives and things in my room. I have knives in the bathroom, just in case, I know that there are lots who like to use guns and some who would rather use a sword or whatever. But I think having a plan in case there's somebody who breaks into your house from any point of your house that you can say, okay, I am here. How can I get out? What's the smartest plan here? Another takeaway, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that this takes place now because it doesn't specify any other time period. So for those of you who don't know, you can text, if you're in the United States, you can text 911 that you need help. So yeah, just keep that in mind. If you're in that situation where you're kind of trapped in your bathroom in a one entrance and exit type of apartment, and there's something in between you and the door, you can text 911 if you're trying to be sneaky. And I don't think it would be completely irrational to have kind of swatted yourself in that situation. I think I probably would have tried to do that. Say, just text 911 and say, hey, somebody's holding me hostage in my own apartment. They're in here and you need to come quick. And sure enough, SWAT team should be there in like 20 minutes. So yeah. Because she was in that bathroom for hours and hours, it said. So that's probably what I would have done. I think, yeah, there's a lot more to be taken away, kind of less physical and more metaphorical, in that she really has a desire to not be scared and to truly see it as just a kind of helpless bug creature type of thing. In the end, especially when she let it out of her apartment and just let it keep going. Or when she fed it afterwards, when she realized it wasn't all that bad or didn't really have all that malicious intent for her, it just had gotten trapped in her house. I don't know that very many people would do that, but I do think it is important to remember, and if there is one character takeaway that we can take away from this. It's to truly give things and people the benefit of the doubt. Start with love and not with hate. And no matter what some looks like. That's just an important thing. But anyways, that's going to wrap up today's video, everybody. Again, I'm CC with the Crucible of Character. And if you like these stories, please let me know. Please let me know your thoughts. What would you have done in this situation? Make sure to comment below. And if you're excited for tomorrow's video, make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss it. The odds of me ending up on your page more than once are very, very slim. So please, if you enjoyed the video and you don't mind seeing these videos on your homepage of YouTube often, make sure to drop a subscribe. It means the world to me. I love you all. Bye. What would you do if in your search for more of these stories, more of these spooky or scary or haunting stories, you ended up becoming part of one yourself? What would you do if in your search to have the next thrill, you became the thrill that someone else could read later? Today's story was posted on the r/nosleep subreddit by Dark Lights, and it's entitled, My Reddit Story is Starting to Come True. If you stick around to the end, we'll find out just how our protagonist may or may not escape from this. Hello, I'm Cece with the Crucible of Character. I like to read stories, haunting ones, scary ones, thrilling ones from Reddit and other places, and post them and try and help us to each become better people from learning from the protagonist. If you enjoyed today's video and you'd like to see more content, make sure to hit that subscribe and like. It really helps me out, and I appreciate it. But anyways, into the story. I'm a regular Reddit user. I like posting stories here. Even though my stories don't get much attention, I don't write them for fame or money. Writing just makes me feel better. I have dozens of short stories and a few unfinished books. This isn't even my real job. I work at a gas station, but I've always been interested in writing since I was a kid. Usually, I post 3 or 4 stories every week in different communities. At best, they get a few thousand views. But I'm not writing this as fiction. For the past few weeks, strange things have been happening, and if I've pieced everything together correctly, a serial killer's after me. And in a few days, I'm gonna die. I don't know what triggered the beginning of all this. My shift ended at midnight. It was a normal Friday night. After work, I went home. Before bed, I opened my laptop. I had this crime novel idea in my head for days, and I wanted to start writing it. I wrote until around 3 a.m. I was half asleep when I typed the last sentence, and at last the sound of the killer's footsteps echoed in the empty street. I was proud of the first chapter. I shut down my laptop and went to the kitchen for some water. While drinking, I saw 2 shadows outside the window. At first, I thought it was just a tree swaying in the wind. Then I heard a woman scream. I froze. The screen was completely empty. The scream cut off suddenly. Now, there were 2 shadows on the building. One was lying on the ground. The other was moving. Then it quickly slid out of sight over the roof. I went outside to check, still in my slippers and pajamas. The street was silent, but when I reached the neighbor building, I couldn't believe what I saw. A woman was slumped against the wall, covered in blood. I recognized her. She was the kind lady who brought me pie when I first moved in. I called 911 and tried to stop the bleeding, but when I checked her pulse, it was gone. She was already dead. The paramedics confirmed it when they arrived. The police asked me a bunch of questions. Did I see the killer? Where was I? Did I notice anything unusual? They took my statement at the station. I got home around 5 a.m., collapsed onto my bed, and thought, this was the worst night of my life since prom. If only it had stayed that way. The next day, I was a mess. I couldn't focus at work. My boss let me leave early. When I came home, the police had blocked off my street with yellow tape and squad cars. The noise was unbearable, so I turned back to my story. Writing always calmed me down. I finished the second chapter I had planned in my head. After writing the last sentence, I heard a siren from next door. His final words sent a shiver through him. Later, I went for a walk in the park to clear my head. I sat on a bench, watching kids play, when an old man with a cane sat next to me. He asked, "Did you hear about that murder?" "I didn't just hear about it," I said. "I saw it from my window." His eyebrows shot up. "Really?" "Yeah," he sighed. "You can't trust people anymore. You never know who's good or evil." I nodded. I was suddenly uncomfortable. I stood up to leave. The man called after me. "Good day, son, and don't forget to watch your back." I told myself it was nothing, just a random warning, but his words kept echoing in my head all the way home. That night, I sat back down at my laptop. I wrote furiously. Hours later, I typed the ending of chapter 3. He barely dodged in time. Looking up, he saw that same face staring down at him. The next day at work, things got worse. A black SUV pulled in. The driver got a receipt for gas. Then, a woman walked in. She looked strange. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking. I ignored her. When the man who just got the receipt mentioned a problem with the pump, I went outside. It was acting up occasionally. I helped him. When I came back, she was standing right at the automatic doors. I almost crashed into her. Startled, I stumbled backwards, right into the path of the SUV that was pulling out. I barely avoided getting run over. The woman didn't even flinch. She just stared at me. For some reason, this woman had really gotten on my nerves. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. Then she turned and walked away. My shift was over, so I left. When I got home, the police teams and crime scenes were gone. I desperately needed a distraction. I found myself at the computer again. This time I really felt the urge to write. After 4 hours of uninterrupted writing, I typed the final sentence of the chapter. And finally, he heard the sounds he feared. Knock, knock, knock. As I always do, I made my coffee and started reading the story I had written from beginning to end. The reason I do this is that I write in parts, so I don't always capture the flow of the story perfectly. While reading, the story took on a whole new dimension in my mind. I read the first part in detail. While correcting typos, something in the line caught my attention. He ran towards the direction of the scream. He knew he was too late. She was already gone. He collapsed beside the woman's lifeless body, and at last, the sound of the killer's footsteps echoed in the empty street. A theory began to form in my head. I continued reading, unconcerned. It was just a coincidence. Every time he tapped his cane on the ground while talking, he flinched, finally unable to stand the strange old man any longer. He got up. As he turned around, the old man called out to him, "Don't forget to check your back." He didn't reply. The man's last words has caused him to tremble. I started reading the next line. Again, when I reached the last paragraph, I noticed the same thing. He raised his head. He was startled by the bulging eyes that had suddenly appeared before him. His feet moved back, as if wanting to flee. At this moment, he hadn't noticed the SUV spinning and screaming down the road. He barely dodged in time. Looking up, he saw that same face staring down at him. I sat up straight in my seat. I was in indescribable fear. My eyes welled up as I read the last line. He understood now. All the pieces had fallen into place. Even the chair he was sitting on suddenly felt uncomfortable. He couldn't stay in place any longer and jumped up. He paced around frantically, his ears focused on a single sound. He sat on the couch to calm himself. He wanted to believe it was all his imagination. To lessen his fear even a little, he buried his face in the pillow. He waited in horror for the slow sound of the door, and finally, he heard the sound he feared. Knock, knock, knock. This couldn't be. It was impossible. I don't know how I didn't realize this while I was writing, because I never considered the possibility of something like this happening. I thought I was inspired by my experiences when writing. It was the exact opposite. I was living what I was writing. I started pacing the room, thought about calling the police. There was no crime committed yet, and as I wrote, I hadn't even heard the sound of the door yet. I thought I was mixing up the timelines in my head. Maybe I had lived it first and then written it, remembering it differently in my head. In fact, I believed this possibility quite strongly. I calmed myself down a bit. As I said, reading too many horror stories made me confuse the real world with fiction. I sat on my couch and sighed. It was all my fabrication, all of it. And then I heard it. 3 knocks on my door. I froze, looked through the peephole. No one was there. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I misheard it. But then, louder this time, 3 more knocks. And 30 seconds later, again. I don't know what to do. I thought about deleting the story. I even rewrote the ending so the killer just vanished, but the knocking hasn't stopped. Maybe this is my last note before I die. I'm going to try to escape. If I don't post again in the next few days, well, I guess my story didn't get the happy ending. The end. I like that story. It was good. I kind of like how it's a little bit meta in the way that it plays on itself and it kind of understands maybe some tropes and works with them. It's interesting. I think it's so cool how it kind of, a lot of these stories in Reddit that I've found so far kind of relate back to a desire to dive into the rabbit hole, but making sure to keep that desire in check in a way. There seems to be a similarity between a lot of the protagonists, and that is that their curiosity for the unknown or their desire to learn more about this kind of dark fascination that they have tends to overpower their desire to live in a way. And I think that that's really powerful. Again, I think I said just a few videos ago, you'll end up getting what you want. And so if what you want is the truth in these things, if what you want is to reach truly the bottom of the rabbit hole, you also have to understand and be willing to accept whatever fate that brings. And so I think that the counsel that I give for this is truly just be wary of the direction you're headed in, because sometimes, well, most of the time, you end up in a place that you cannot go back from. And so you have to understand that you might be on autopilot, but that doesn't mean that you can take it back. Now, for differences in the story, one, there's a kind of a common thing if you watch movies and TV where somebody's taken a hostage. If at any point the guy with the gun takes his mask off, then you know all the hostages are probably dead. right? Because if they see the face, then you can't have any witnesses, right? So, at least in my mind, if I see out my window and I see there's some shadows and I'm thinking, oh, you know what, maybe that's something scary going on, I'm probably going to get to a position where I can watch kind of strategically, but not so much so that they notice that I'm watching. Or I might even just leave the room. That's a smart idea too. Because if there's someone who is so bold as to literally murder someone in a backyard, in the middle of a neighborhood, there's literally nothing different about that scenario and them just hopping the fence and stabbing you as well, or doing whatever to you as well. So I guess my change that I would do is be smart. Again, curiosity killed the cat in both scenarios. So be careful at what you're doing and what you want to do and what you want to be a part of. I think that's a double play on the same kind of lesson to be learned there. But anyways, if y'all have any other suggestions or comments or things that you would have done differently, please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe for more daily content like this. I appreciate you all. I love you all. And I'll talk to you later. Bye. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I hope you appreciated those 5 horrifying stories from the tomb of Reddit. If you really did enjoy them, please make sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And it does more in the algorithm than you might think. I'm trying to hit 100 subscribers by the end of the year. Hopefully we can smash that goal and set even higher ones. Thank you for all the support that y'all have given these videos once again. I do appreciate it. I love you all. Bye.